it's Rachel with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. I'm here with Ryan with Vortex Optics. We're here wrapping up our Get Dialed series. We're here to provide you the best information we can and educational tools for you to become the most effective and efficient hunter using the equipment that you have. We've really been focused on our optics and how to get everything dialed in for the season. So we've gone over what to look for when you're purchasing a scope. We've talked about mounting it. We've talked about bore sighting, and then just getting it basically sighted into a group. But the reality is that's the range, and all we did was just sight our rifle in from a bench. And that's not really putting us in a situation that we can make sure that all of our equipment is really dialed in for conditions that we come across, whether it's distance, whether it's positions that we're shooting in. So if you could give us all some great tips on some drills to run through to help us become more efficient with our equipment.
Sure. So there's no substitution for repetition. And something that I like to do in the off season, pre or post, is get out and practice on the range at ranges in field conditions. So what I like to do is I'll run up my dope chart like we talked about earlier. I'll grab my rangefinder, I'll grab my spotting scope, take my rig out to the field and shoot it at distances that I would commonly encounter game or engage game. So I'll grab a bunch of targets and I'll set them up in random positions. And again, using that equipment like the rangefinder, I'll tag my target, reference that dope chart, dial or manipulate my optic, hold over my optic, simulating those infield conditions, shooting from things like shooting sticks, my pack, bipods, a nice hard rock or something, and put it to task and see how it works out. One thing we talked about earlier with the dope chart was muzzle velocity, and getting as close to accurate numbers as possible is extremely critical for developing a good dope chart. And even when you're using a device like a chronograph, there can be some discrepancy in this. And in the process we call range validation, in which you take those numbers that you drew up and you test them at distances to see how consistent those numbers are. You'll either make minor corrections to the velocity within the calculator or just hand scribbles on your dope chart to know that actually instead of 10 MOA at distance X, I need 10.5. Just small things like that to ensure that when you're in the field, you're leaving nothing to chance and that you're putting that bullet where it needs to go.
And I suppose, what are some of the other things that we might discover when we're through that? Could we discover that perhaps we don't have, like, say, the right distance between the scope and our eye? What are some of the things that we might crop up against where it's like, oh, this is the reason I'm shooting?
Yep, so that's a big one. Cheek weld and optic position, head position on the optic. You might not like the way it turned out. So earlier when we were going over setting that optic up for optimal eye relief, we did it in a standing position. And we recommend this advantageously because it's kind of a middle ground between seated and prone. When we're prone, we're going to be much closer to the rifle. When we're seated, we're going to be much further from the optic rather. So that standing is kind of that middle ground. If you think you're going to be primarily shooting your rifle from a prone position, you might take that into consideration, make a small change. It's not going to be catastrophic to your zero. You're probably going to have to redo it or fine tune it a little bit, but it could mean the difference between can take the shot and can't take the shot in the field if you can't get behind that optic comfortably. Small things like that. And then ammunition performance. How is your gun working and reacting with the ammunition that you're shooting it? Did you have an expectation that at a given distance you're going to be able to shoot a group of a particular size and you find out it's not? Maybe at that point we go back to the drawing board before the big hunt and we get that taken care of and addressed and corrected.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for running us through some of these tips.
Yeah.
Again, if you are looking for more information on this, you can visit Vortex website. You can sign up to take some marksmanship classes here at Vortex Edge Shooting Facility. We recommend really hammering on that education, spending a lot of time at the range, making sure you're educating yourself, and making sure you're effective when you're out there after our animals. So thank you much for joining us, and we'll see you out in the field.